Imagine surrounding yourself with incredible women who've overcome challenges, they've rebounded after failures and disappointments, and women who are not afraid to shine their brilliance to make a mark in the world. These women support other like-minded women because they know there is plenty of opportunity for everyone, and that together we really can make a difference, grow our businesses while have fun along the way. This is what Women in Leadership Podcast is all about. Welcome. I'm your host, Anne-Marie Cross. Grab a cuppa of your favourite beverage, pull up a chair, and let's get this conversation started. And welcome to another episode. So joining me on today's show is Dr. Karen Hills Pruden. Dr. Karen, she is a leadership strategist whose career spans 30 years. She rose from the front line to the C-suite, where she remains today, 16 years later. Now, through her business, which is Pruden Global Business Solutions Consulting, Karen employs 3 frameworks to assist businesses to remain competitive, as well as to sustain themselves during market chaos. Now, on today's show, Dr. Karen's going to share how to take control of our careers. Let's stop being the co-pilot. She's going to talk about why qualification, not a myth, how to showcase your added value, as well as how volunteering can be key to your next promotion. So welcome to the show, Dr. Karen.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm excited about the conversation.
So am I. Let's dive in, because as we were going live, you let me know that you're on the other side of the world. I'm based in Melbourne. You're on the other side of the world, and you've got a snowstorm. So show must go on, as they say. And I know you've got some incredible insights to share. We're going to dive in. How can we take control of our careers? Stop being the co-pilot. What insights can you share?
Absolutely. And so really that kind of motto comes from a pain point that I experienced earlier in my career, where I was promised a promotion. And when my boss had announced her retirement, and then she got cold feet and decided not to retire. And so that situation went on where she announced that she was going to retire. I was told that I would be her successor. I was the next in line. I didn't have to apply for it. Anything was going to be automatically given to me. And so over a period of time of 1 year, she was handing over her duties, getting ready for retirement. And then when the 1 year mark hit, there was no talk of retirement, and she was still on deck. And so I was coming to work every day, a little ambivalent about what was going on. Wasn't brave enough to have the conversation start the conversation myself. And so I worked for another 6 months. So this is a total of 18 months where I'm wondering what is going on. So I went from a 14-year employee who drove 2 hours a day to a job that I love, to now I'm going to work every day and I'm totally unhappy and I don't know what is going on. And so that you are a pilot and not a co-pilot, that is where that saying and that motto came from, because I eventually left that organization after I realized she was not going to retire, and I found a promotion outside of the business. But I realized that I had some partnership in how that went down, because I didn't say anything and I didn't do anything for a while. And so now I encourage all leaders to assume the role of pilot and not co-pilot. And if you determine it is time for you to move up, then you either move up internally or externally, but do not put that power in anyone else's hands.
Yes. And in your situation, of course, you had been promised something had already been planned out. So in hindsight now, isn't hindsight a wonderful teacher? If someone is finding themselves in that position, would you now, looking back, have spoken to her? What sort of time frame? Let's give some people some key strategies on would you have approached that conversation were you to go back in time to broach, well, hang on a minute, aren't you supposed to be retired? What do you think you would have said? How would you approach that conversation?
Yes.
Here's the door.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And to complicate the dynamics, my boss was not only my boss, but she was my friend because we had worked side by side my whole 14-year career. We rose through the ranks together. And so you had this friendship, and then you had this dynamics of a authority figure. But I think at the point of at least at 6 months, there should have been some check-in conversations that we didn't have. Hey, it's going to be 6 months when you retire. And then I think at that point, not even waiting the whole year, I think at that point that maybe would have opened the floor, because once I left the organization, she shared with me later that she was just scared. She was scared to share with me that she didn't have her finances in order to retire. And so she had changed her mind. She was scared that I was going to leave. But like you said, hindsight is 2020, because I end up leaving anyway because she did not communicate with me. But I think I could have been proactive, and at the 6-month mark, say, hey, we have 6 months left. What is that offboarding going to be looking like for you? And that would have opened the door for the conversation from her that she needed to move her exit date down a little further down the calendar. At least I would have known, because I found out that she didn't leave until 2 years after I actually finally left the organization.
Yes, it makes the dynamics complicated, as you said, if that person is your friend. But I'm glad that later she was able to have that conversation with you. And it is communication, or the lack of, isn't it? And I think sometimes we're a little bit afraid to go and talk about that. But if we look at it from a win-win, and that each of us is going to walk away from that conversation being far more informed and having the right information that we can both make the right decision, which is right for us, I think then we don't need to be scared of broaching that conversation. Yes, because it can be scary.
Absolutely.
Talking to someone.
And I think for me, it was more scary of what the conversation would yield, because it was obvious that she wasn't going anywhere. And so I could kind of feel that without the words being said. And so I think the fear was more on my side of, I don't know if I really needed to know the why. At that point, it was more disrespect, because it was obviously she wasn't leaving. So the why didn't really make a difference. It was the lack of communication, and it was my inability to be brave enough to start the conversation because of the dynamics.
Yeah. And I think, from her perspective, and we are all leaders, as you say, sometimes not talking about it and thinking it will resolve itself, the situation won't, because with a lack of narrative, the other party is going to put their spin, their narrative on it, and it often will end up much worse because we start to stew on those things. And so looking back, I mean, you may have had that conversation with her and then been able to make plans on, it may have been different what you look like. There might have been another opportunity, or there might have been that support there as you decided, well, if she's staying on, I'm going to move forward to another opportunity. Thankfully, you had an opportunity and you were able to step up. So that's always wonderful. But I love that. So what would be just maybe one insights before we move on to talking about overqualification, that being a myth? If someone is thinking today, oh, yes, Dr. Karen, I need to go and have that conversation. And the longer I leave it, the more, inside gets stirred. What would you say to them to go and have that conversation? Are there some things that you did before that, any conversation that you have that makes you prepared so that you can go and speak strategically, calmly? What would you share some insights here?
Yeah, I think you really touched on it, making sure that you're calm, making sure, I would say, write down your talking points, or at least have your talking points in your head as to what you're going to say, how you're going to say it. You don't want to trigger your own emotions and the emotions of the person that you're talking to the point that you can't have a productive conversation. And then just stick to the facts. You can keep it brief. In my case, I just wanted to know what was the status. And it didn't have to be a long, drawn out conversation. And so sometimes brevity is your friend. And so, notes, keep it brief, try to be non-emotional with it. That's helpful. so that you can get the information that you are seeking. And because there's also an exchange of information, because again, I was a employee who had worked for 14 years, who were commuting over 2 hours a day to get there to a job that I loved. I literally loved this job. And now I'm no longer happy. And so, and I'm sure, even though I didn't, I'm sure that impacted me emotionally and mentally. But I'm sure it also impacted me in terms of productivity as well.
You know, I love the situation that you've shared as a very, a situation that people who are listening may relate to. But even in your career in general, isn't it? So often, I mean, I worked in the career industry as a career coach for well over 10, 15 years. And I found that so often we spend far more time planning our holidays than we did about planning our careers. And I think this is a beautiful example too, which can be very relevant to our taking control of our careers rather than letting opportunities to come to us. So I wonder in your career, and obviously you've got a business, but what sort of things can you share with women who may be in a career and hoping that opportunities come to them, but we really can say, look, stop being the co-pilot, step into the pilot seat. What are some strategies? What are some things that they can do to start to take control of their opportunities so that we're not just waiting for them to come, but rather being strategically positioned in the right place so that your name comes forward when opportunities do come up in the organization?
Yeah, that is wonderful. I believe visibility creates opportunity. No one knows your full breadth of your competencies. A lot of times people identify you with your current position. They don't know about the skill sets that you bring to an organization or to a role from your prior work. And the only way that they're going to know that is by you raising your hand, doing different situations and volunteering to be part of committees. I think I shared with you that, you can get promoted through volunteering. A lot of people don't speak up a lot of times in the workplace because they don't want to be in charge of a new group or a new committee that has to look into whatever it is that they're putting on the table. But this is how people can see the breadth of what you bring to an organization in terms of your skill set. This is sometimes how, because of the multi-level individuals that are associated with group work, this is how people who are in a position to create a position for you. I've had positions created for me because I volunteered to be on a committee. And so sometimes people wouldn't get the benefit of being able to see your full skill set without you doing those additional duties. And they don't always come with an additional paycheck. Just know that you may acquire some additional, I call them ambassadors, people who know your skill sets, people who can speak your name into rooms that you haven't entered yet. And someone may throw your name in the hat for a position that you're unaware of. And so visibility creates opportunities. So just know that those opportunities do not always come with an additional paycheck.
Mm-hmm. And you can use this strategy too for women who are in their own business. You need to be visible. You need to go to various meetings and, organizations and industry meetings, I think, to connect with people, because it's incredible, the connections. And you start to develop those connections. They get to know you. They get to see your expertise and how you can contribute. And that's just so important too. And this, I think, segues beautifully into the topic of overqualification being a myth, how to showcase your added value. So speak more about this, because I think many of us have incredible experiences, expertise, qualifications that can bring so much more to the table, yet we're keeping them hidden because we think, I don't want to be seen as overqualified or knowing too much or whatever it might be. So what insights can you share here?
Yeah, so that is near and dear to my heart, because my lane of brilliance is human resources. I've been in human resources senior leadership for the last 16 years. I have a 28-year career in human resources. And many times I've seen people actually get dismissed because of being seen as overqualified. And so really that motto really comes from those who are looking at one as being overqualified and excluding them. I am one who has stepped down. I know a lot of people don't do it, but I have stepped back at least once in my career backwards. And people always question when someone, is applying for a lesser job. At that time, I got tired of traveling. I was in a senior leadership position. I was over 14 different states, and I literally travel 80% of the time. And I'm a mother and I'm a wife. And so I wanted a position where I was a little bit more stationary. Well, when I tried to get positions that did not require travel, a lot of those positions I was overqualified for, and I was overlooked because I was so overqualified. And it wasn't until I had a conversation with someone about it, because I know how it works. I've had many conversations with managers who dismissed overqualified candidates before. So I knew what was going on, that you need to get people to the table and at least ask them, say, look, this appears to be that you're going backwards. Tell me about that. If someone had asked me, I would have been able to say, look, I'm tired of traveling. And so I did have a organization who did just that. They say, look, this appears to be a position that you had about a decade ago. Tell me a little bit about why you're applying for this position. We're calling to interview you, but we just trying to figure out where you are. And I said, look, I'm tired of traveling. And after I shared that with them, they added me to the interview list, and I went on to go through the process. And that happened to be the company that I ended up staying with for 14 years. And I ended up working my way back up. But I added a whole lot of value to that job that I came into, because literally I had did it over 10 years ago and not much had changed. A few systems had changed, but the processes itself had not changed. And so I was able to add value from day one. I was also a leader of people. This was not a leadership position, but because I had been a leader, you don't cut off the spigot of being a leader. I served as a involuntary leader pretty much once I was hired, because that's the only way I knew how to operate, was to mentor and coach individuals and different things like that. And so I immediately added value to that lesser position. And so I was able to take them further quicker, just because I was so skilled. And so I just encourage everyone not to look at overqualification as a dismissal item. Look at it as added value, and just ask people why, why they're interested in various positions, because it may be a situation where it's not that they're not going to stay, but it's work-life balance, home life, tired, in my case, tired of traveling type situation. So that is where that premise came from, me stepping back in my career and knowing how that is viewed, and the difficulties that myself and others have trying to get jobs that you're overqualified for without people asking you why.
Yeah. Asking a question, why, as you said, really opened up a win-win situation for both. You got to a job which you absolutely loved, a career that you loved without the travel, and they got to benefit from your wealth and depth of expertise, which I think is just wonderful. I'd love to talk, because in the introduction, we mentioned, we've touched on the volunteering is so important, because it can get you in front of people who you may never have an opportunity to work with were it not for that voluntary project. So I'd love to take a snippet from the introduction where we mentioned that you employ 3 frameworks to assist businesses to remain competitive and sustain themselves through market chaos. And I think this is going to be valuable for women who have their own business, but also women in leadership roles within a company, because if we look around what's happening in the world, there is a lot of chaos going on at the moment. So I would love to tap into your expertise and talk about, what can businesses do differently? What can we do to innovate, to be able to remain competitive and sustain business, maybe not necessarily business growth exponentially, but certainly that we can continue to operate, even though the market is doing lots of crazy things. So what insights can you share here, Dr. Karen?
Absolutely. So, yeah, as you mentioned, I do have three frameworks. They are trademark frameworks that I use in business. And one of the frameworks is called professional equity, which is the PE framework. And this framework empowers professionals to kind of leverage their experience into reputational capital. And you do that to be used at the individual's discretion, kind of like people think about equity in terms of like home equity, anything that increase in value, but the same thing happens for your career and your reputation. The three legs of professional equity is your reputation, your relationships, and your area expertise. And I'll touch very quickly on those three legs. So your reputation. Your reputation is what are people saying about you in terms of the problem that you solve? And that's whether you're in or outside of the room, because that is what people are going to be thinking about in terms of additional opportunities, promotion, hiring your business if you're an entrepreneur. And so what is that reputation? Number two, relationships. Our relationships are very multifaceted in that if you're working in corporate, the higher up you go, the more you are tied into individuals. Your success is dependent on everyone up under you doing what it is that they're supposed to do. And so you need to have a relationship. I call it up and down the chain and in and out of corporate. And what does in and out of corporate mean? A lot of times we shy away from casual lunches and dinners or going to a birthday party or being invited to a wedding. But a lot of those ancillary conversations with coworkers outside of the workplace, that's how people get to know you beyond the surface relationship, and you get to find out about commonalities, things that you have in common. And so they feel like that know, like, and trust factor that people need, and it's needed in the workplace. And so relationships are very critical. And then your specialty. I require everybody I know, particularly individuals who work with me, what is your specialty? What is your lane of brilliance? And what do you do that is great? It's called USP, your unique selling proposition. What makes you different from people with similar education, similar experience? And what is it that you do uniquely that's uniquely to you? And that is extremely important, because when there is a problem in corporate or in the market, then that is when people come searching for you. If they know you're good with data and they have a financial situation or a data situation, then they'll look out for you. If they know for technology, my two lanes are technology and analytics. I'm a geeky nerd. I love numbers. Just love numbers. And so people need to know what your area expertise is. So when there is a problem, they can say, hey, call this person or call that person. So that's professional equity. And then I also have another framework, which is the LPT framework, which is the Learn, Practice, Teach framework. And this is designed to promote a continuous cycle of upward performance and growth from the new entrance. I call it a new professional entrance, from someone getting their first job all the way up to the practitioner, to the expert. That we are constantly learning, building on our skills, and then we reach a certain point where we are now teaching others. And so that is the Learn, Practice, Teach framework. And then I have what is called your Amplify Your Value series. And this helps professionals be able to convert their expertise into quantifiable language. I mentioned I was a geeky nerd, and so I believe in metrics. And so how do you add a metrics into what you're doing in terms of productivity, so that you can communicate the changes that has happened as a result of your presence there in the market or in the workplace. And how do you justify and validate that metrics? Me working in human resources, we're not a revenue generating company or department. And so I always had to create a verifiable, sustainable metrics to validate my budget at the table, to keep my budget from being cut. And so for Amplify Your Value, I help individuals create a formula so that they can create a quantifiable metric, so that you can tie in your progress with the organizational progress to show that what you're doing is tied into the organizational goals. And so those are the three frameworks that we are working on with now with businesses. And so it depends on what stage and what your area of focus is within the organization, whether or not you need a professional equity framework, a LPT framework, or amplify your value framework.
Or maybe all three
Or
when you start
maybe.
looking. But it's interesting as you were saying that those things, you can see as individuals, as leaders, each is important. And then from a business perspective, I think it's really important if you can support your individual team members in being able to recognize what that is for themselves. I mean, it's a win-win for everyone, isn't it? It's a win for the individual, it's a win for the team, a win for the organization. And as you know, I think organizations who are really leveraging the best out of their individual team members, that impacts customers. And when customers are really happy, they're not going to go and look for other businesses, are they? Or other service providers, whatever business that you're in. And so I think it's, those frameworks are wonderful and adopted, individually, but also on a corporate business perspective as well. Do you find out of those three, I mean, they're all very important, but sometimes in we may identify that, look, often it's this missing leg of the three frameworks that often impact the other two. Do you find that a lot of individuals struggle with one or more of those, or they are the same? Does that make sense? Does my question make sense?
Yes, absolutely it does. For me, because I know the power of analytics, I think amplify your value and creating a formula to be able to articulate the progress that you are making in the market or in a business and being able to tie it into the original organizational goals is critical. Because if you as an entrepreneur have set aside organizational goals, then your day-to-day resources, your time, your money, and your talents need to work towards those goals. If you work for someone else, then you need to be able to create a metric so you can see the movement of it. Are you going in the right direction? Do you need to tweak anything? Do you need to allocate more time towards this, more money, or upgrade your systems? And so with amplify your value, it is so tied into your goals and the performance of your goals. I think it is more critical for everybody to make sure that you are able to do that, because how do you track your progress? How do you track areas of deficiency that you need to give more attention to? How do you track in areas that you aren't revenue producing? If you don't have a way to say that we contributed this amount of money directly, then how do you even quantify through conversation and the metrics that can be verified your being in the organization? And you have to be able to do that with some form of numbers. Not everybody is a revenue producing department. Most of us aren't, but we still need to be able to communicate our existence and be able to justify our existence and justify our payroll and justify the time that we spend in the upgrades and buying systems so that we can get our work done. And so for me, I think it would be amplify your value, because everybody needs to be able to amplify their value in terms of be able to communicate and do it in a form of a metrics that can be tracked, and you can explain that metrics and why it is moving either upward or downward.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And from a business perspective too, from that, company, or if they're an entrepreneur, how can you continue, you might be cutting the budget on something that if you did measure and track, can see over the long term or even short term, it's contributing to the overall growth. You just have not tracked and measured it. And so if you cut the budget or think we're not going to do that anymore because it's not contributing, it may end up really impacting negatively your overall results. So I think that's important individually, but also from a business perspective as well. So look, I have absolutely loved the conversation. I'm so glad the internet connected and that the snowstorm didn't interrupt the electricity. That was wonderful. So Dr. Karen, how can people find out more about you, and what's the best way for them to connect?
Absolutely. So I have a legacy website under my name, drkarenhillspruden.com. You can find all things that I do there, but I also have a free Facebook community for women leaders called Sister Leaders. I do have a community called Sister Leaders, which is a community of men and women committed to increasing the number of women in senior leadership. And so we have about 3,000 individuals in that community. We are global, so we have people that are all over the world, and really we share experiences, we share education, we share networks, and it's all for the elevation of the woman leader.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I've loved our conversation today. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, it's Anne-Marie. Before I go, are you a coach or a consultant who feels like the world's best kept secret? Your experience is vast, yet secretly you're frustrated because despite all of your hard work, you're just not getting the visibility, leads, or new clients you'd hope for, and you don't know why? I've created free training and resources that'll help you build visibility, generate leads, and enroll dream clients with ease because you're seen as a trusted authority, even in a crowded marketplace. And you've positioned yourself as the choice versus just a choice with your unique, uncopyable, and unforgettable brand and message. And you're able to nurture listeners into leads from your podcast, even from your first episode. To access these free resources, go to ambitiousentrepreneurnetwork.com/community. That's ambitiousentrepreneurnetwork.com/community.